Vandeham Sri
Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Welcome to Srimad Bhagavatam class, and also please join in welcoming Mother Anandarupa back. We haven't heard from her in a while, and it's nice that we can have her association this morning. She's the one that's going to be giving the class. Class is on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Cosmic Manifestation, Chapter 10. Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. And this morning we're doing text 19. Hare Krishna, Mataji, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, Parikshit Prabhuji, please accept my most humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, Guru and Gauranga.
Yeah, it's all yours now. Hare
I'm
Krishna.
grateful to be back. Krishna willing, will continue for as long as Krishna and devotees would like me to glorify the Lord and his devotees.
Right.
Should I start, Prabhuji?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Normally we don't ask, we just go right into it. The
Okay.
speakers just go right into it, yeah.
Okay. So, dear devotees, I welcome you all to this Srimad Bhagavatam talk. Let's start with the prayers, as is the standard format. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari, Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari, Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Brajana Ranjana, Jamuna Tira Vanachari, Jamuna Tira Vanachari, Jai Radha Madhava Kunj Bihari, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramhans Parivrajakacarya Ashtottar Shat Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Om Vishnupad Paramhans Parivrajakacarya Ashtottar Shat Srimad His Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj ki Jai.
Jai.
Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki Jai. Prem
Jai.
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda ki jai. Shri
Yay.
Krishna Gop Gopinath Shyam Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan ki jai. Shri
Yay.
Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Shri Mayapur
Yay.
Dham ki jai. Shri
Yay.
Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai.
Yay.
Ganga Mai ki jai. Jamuna Mai ki
Yay.
jai. Bhakti
Yay.
Mai Tulsi Devi ki jai. Anant Koti Vaishnav Vrinda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare
All
Krishna.
glories to the assembled devotees. All
Hare
glories to
Krishna.
assembled devotees.
Hare
All
Krishna.
glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga.
Glory to Shri Guru.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiriet. Shravtam Swakatha Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hridayantasto He Bhadrani Vidunoti Sarhatsatam Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavat Sevaya Bhagavate Ruttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtiki. So we are continuing reading from Canto 2, Chapter 10, verse 19. For those who are fairly new to Srimad Bhagavatam, so Srimad Bhagavatam has 12 cantos. Each canto has several chapters. So ISKCON of Harrisburg is currently in morning Srimad Bhagavatam classes. They have covered till verse number 18 in this Canto 2, Chapter 10. And so Parikshit Prabhuji has kindly shared the verse on the screen. I will recite the verse 3 times, and then those of you feel comfortable, you can recite the verse. Vivakṣor mukhato bhūmno vyāhṛtaṁ tayoḥ jale caitasya suciraṁ nirodhaḥ samajāyata vivakṣor mukhato bhūmno vahnir vyāhṛtaṁ tayoḥ jale caitasya suciraṁ nirodhaḥ samajāyata vivakṣor mukhato bhūmno vahnir vyāhṛtaṁ tayoḥ jale caitasya suciraṁ nirodhaḥ samajāyata. Hare Krishna.
Vivakṣor mukhato bhūmno vahnir vyāhṛtaṁ tayoḥ jale caitasya suciraṁ nirodhaḥ samajāyata. Hare Krishna.
Anyone else would like to recite?
Hare Krishna. Vivakṣor mukhato bhūmno vahnir vyāhṛtaṁ tayoḥ jale caitasya suciraṁ nirodhaḥ samajāyata. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Anyone else? So now we will read from synonyms, word for word meaning. Vivakṣor, when there was a need to speak. Mukhata, from the mouth. Bhūmna, of the supreme. Vahni, fire or the controlling deity of fire. Vak, vibration. Vyāhṛtaṁ, speeches. Tayoḥ, by both. Jale, in the water. Cha, however. Caitasya, of all these. Suciraṁ, very, very long time. Nirodha, suspension. Samajāyata, did continue. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. When the Supreme desired to speak, speeches were vibrated from the mouth. Then the controlling deity fire was generated from the mouth. But when he was lying in the water, all these functions remained suspended. Purport. The peculiarity of gradual development of the different senses is simultaneously supported by their controlling deities. It is to be understood, therefore, that the activities of the sense organs are controlled by the will of the Supreme. The senses are, so to speak, offering a license for the conditioned souls who are to use them properly under the control of the controlling deity deputed by the Supreme Lord. One who violates such controlling regulations has to be punished by degradation to a lower status of life. Consider, for example, the tongue and its controlling deity Varun. The tongue is meant for eating, and men, animals, and birds each have their different tastes because of different licenses. The taste of human beings and that of the swine are not on the same level. The controlling deity, however, awards or certifies a particular type of body when the particular living entity develops a taste in terms of different modes of nature. If the human being develops taste without discrimination, as does the swine, then the controlling deity is certainly certified for the next term to award him the body of a swine. The swine accepts any kind of foodstuff, including stools, and a human being who has developed such indiscriminate taste must be prepared for a degraded life in the next life. Such a life is also God's grace because the conditioned soul desired a body like that for perfectly tasting a particular type of foodstuff. If a man gets the body of a swine, it must be considered the grace of the Lord, because the Lord awards the facility. After death, the next body is offered by superior control, not blindly. A human being, therefore, must be on his guard as to what sort of body he is going to have in the next life. An irresponsible life of discrimination is risky, and that is the declaration of all scriptures. So, so we are receiving these instructions, these teachings in parampara. And so before even beginning to meditate on these teachings, let's recite the prayers, Mangalacharan prayers. Let us seek benedictions from our acharyas for this great treasure of knowledge, so we can understand the purpose kindly given to us by Ved Vyasji, Shukdev Goswami, our acharyas, and especially Srila Prabhupada. So, Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitanena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtha Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurvani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschate Deshitarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Guru Vrinda ki jai. All right, so I normally like to, when preparing for these Srimad Bhagavatam talks, I like to present a little introduction. So it may benefit everyone, because in the, audience, we always have someone who is new to these teachings. So we are entering a very special part of Srimad Bhagavatam in this chapter, Canto 2, Chapter 10, where Shukdev Goswami is speaking, with this entire Bhagavad Katha. Shukdev Goswami is narrating this divine scripture to King Parikshit. And this entire chapter is not just philosophical explanation. there are all these verses, they include the essence of why Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken at all. And that is to answer life's deepest questions. So the chapter starts with Shukdev Goswami listing 10 major subject matters that Bhagavatam addresses. And I will quickly go through it, that how the universe is created, how life exists in it, what our ultimate goal should be, and finally, it will talk about it. This verse, actually, from this verse onwards, it starts talking about surrendering. And so the 10 subject matters, 10 topics are like roadmap that show us the purpose behind all these pastimes, stories, teachings we read. We do Shravan and Kirtan. And so every verse in this chapter is a part of that roadmap. And the verse we are focusing on today, the 19th verse, is small but important step in describing how functions of creation like speech, fire, they all originated from Supreme even before our manifested universe took shape. So in simple terms, we learn in this verse a lot, including speech and its elements has source in Supreme Lord, and that it points us towards understanding how the created or the ordered universe comes from Supreme Will. Now, who is speaking and why? In this chapter, Shukdev Goswami is speaking Bhagavatam to King Parikshit in response to Parikshit's heartfelt desire to understand. What is he trying to understand? Life, death, soul, supreme. So Bhagavatam is thus presented as the answer to all the questions about existence. And the first verse talks about 10 subject matters. So they are Sarga, the primary creation of universe, Visarga, the secondary creation, Sthan, the planetary systems, Poshan, how the Lord sustains the belief and life, Utaya, the motivation force, the motive force of activities. The subject matter also includes Manvantaras, the eras of creation under Manus. Then Isha Anukantha, the story is about Lord's incarnations. Nirodha, renouncing material life. It talks about the other two subject matters are Mukti, liberation, and Ashraya, the ultimate shelter of the Supreme Lord. So the first 9 subject matters are emphasized. They are described so that we clearly understand the 10th, and that the Supreme Lord is our ultimate shelter and the true purpose of life. So where does this verse fit in? This verse 19, I just read the translation and purport. It fits with the description of primary creation, Sarga. Part of the very early stages show there's stages of how the cosmos and its functions came about. So we read about speech and fire they arise from Supreme Lord's desire to speak, pointing out that even the beginnings of creation have their root in Lord's conscious will, supreme will, rather than blind material process. So now this connects us back to the first subject matter, Sarga, and reminds us that the Creator, the Supreme Lord, and the created are not separate. Everything stems from Supreme Person. So previous verses, they are talking about appropriate engagement of the senses. And that is something practical from day-to-day life. We are directly experiencing. But when we read Srimad Bhagavatam, which is spoken by Shukdev Goswami to King Parikshit, and who is King Parikshit? He has only 7 days to live. So instead of asking how to save his body, which is having these uncontrolled senses and mind, Parikshit asks the most important question: what is the purpose of life and what should I remember at death? So now these verses, they give us clarity, direction. They give us the direction that where should we find the shelter to the soul. And so this chapter is important. Shukdev Goswami gives a map of entire Bhagavatam. He says, the book discusses 10 subject matters, but all of them are meant to lead us to one conclusion: the Supreme Lord is ultimate shelter of everything. So the 9 topics from the subject matters list of 10 are explaining the journey. The 10th topic tells us where to rest. So now we will see this verse will give us enough inputs so we can reflect on something very practical like speech, fire, expression, action, and they're all not accidental. They come from Supreme Lord's desire and arrangement. So now we should think about how nothing we use daily, like speaking, cooking, praying, is independent of Him. And even before creation begins, the Lord has already arranged how life will function. Something to keep in mind as I go through the content again with our Vaishnavacharya's teachings. And so I have an acronym to help us understand better. And let me pull this up. Okay. So earlier I mentioned senses. The verse is also talking about that when Supreme Lord desired to speak, speeches were vibrated from the mouth. Then the controlling deity fire was generated from the mouth. But when he was lying in the water, all these functions remain suspended. So what does this verse now at a deeper level convey to us? The acronym I prepared to help understand this better is deity, DEITY. So let me go through some of the points using this acronym that will help us understand better how we can transcend from controlling or engaging the senses from uncontrolled state to the point of with a yielding consciousness or coming to the point of surrender. Why are we talking about that? Because here it says in the translation, when he was lying in the water, all the functions remain suspended. Okay. And here in the purport, it says, after death, the next body is offered by superior control, not blindly offered. A human being, therefore, must be on his guard as to what sort of body he is going to have in this life. An irresponsible life of indiscrimination is risky, and that is the declaration of scriptures. So we need to reflect on as we go through these teachings that what kind of life do we live? How we can prayerfully make it suitable for offering. So to first of all, even how to even begin understanding what is the supreme will, what is the divine desire. We are learning, we read in Srimad Bhagavatam, creation begins with the Lord's will. So obviously, we are learning that one has to submit to the will of Krishna. And then we also understand that there are deities who regulate the senses. So there should be respect for these deities. And under that respect, or with that mindset, what are we supposed to do? Where we are talking about senses. And then these senses are tools They are not masters. These are instrumental senses. So we have a responsibility to use senses appropriately. And then there was a in the, I think it's in Srila Prabhupada's purport, that the taste of human beings and that of swine are not on the same level. However, the controlling deity awards or certifies a particular type of body when particular living entity develops a taste in terms of different modes of nature. So obviously now here there is a talk about some level of discrimination, how our desires shape the next body. So some purification we all have to go through, and which will bring us to the ultimate point of what does this Supreme Lord's suspension mean? The functions, suspension of the suspension of the functions mean, right? The sentences, but when he was lying in the water, all these functions remain suspended. What does that mean? Okay. So now we understand where this verse sits, why it matters, how it frames the entire discussion of sensory responsibility. So let's take the first letter of the acronym, D. So let us understand divine desire with the letter D. So creation begins with the will of the Lord, right? And we learn that the divine desire is the root of all reality. So now, in conditioned life, think about it. We assume, we talk like this: I want, therefore I act, I decide, therefore things happen. But what does Srimad Bhagavatam teach us? It teaches us just the opposite, that the Lord desires. We constantly read about supreme will of the Lord. We understand from life experience that the Lord desires and creation unfolds. And here, the last sentence about suspension, we learn that the Lord withdraws the desire, then the functions are suspended. So there is a supreme will. So even potential capacity exists only by divine sanction. So this means free will, the word free will is subordinate, not absolute. And even the so-called independence, it is licensed, not inherent. And responsibility arises because Lord allows desire to operate. So we read in Bhagavad Gita that Paramatma, Supreme Lord as Paramatma within the hearts, he is the supreme witness, overseer, and permitter of our desires. Okay. So, but Lord allows desire to operate. So we have these material bodies so we can fulfill our desires. At the same time, to ignore divine will or supreme will is the root cause of false ego, ahankar. Srila Prabhupada repeatedly taught that nothing happens accidentally in creation. Everything moves according to the desire of Supreme Personality of Godhead, just as a government operates by will, not chance. And then what about the independence of the living entity? So the living entity's so-called independence exists only because Krishna allows it. And misuse of that independence leads to, what does that lead to? Misuse of this independence leads to, anyone? Repeated birth and death. So, and the last sentence where it says the functions are suspended, when Lord withdraws his sanction, even the most powerful senses become useless, like a microphone without electricity. So he taught that the real spiritual advancement, Srila Prabhupada says, real spiritual advancement begins when one stops asking, what do I want? And he starts asking, what does Krishna want from me? Yesterday only, very quickly, I want to mention, there was on another call, there was a discussion about there was a discussion about even after reading from scriptures, even after chanting holy names, for many, many years, devotees may experience this. They may have a lot of, for certain reasons, they may experience emotions which are categorized in inferior modes of nature. Not having the ability to let go, having resentment, experiencing some deep level of adverse emotions. It is there we should pray to remember, instead of asking, what do I want? What do I really want? One should come eventually to the point, what is the message from this situation from me, for me? What does Krishna want from me? So we understand devotional life begins when one aligns personal desires with the mission of Supreme Lord and his representative. Quick question. I'm tempted to ask. Any one of you can quickly comment and it will help everyone. Where can one find what is the mission of Supreme Lord and his representatives? If one already can't figure that out, or, they may not be, everyone may not be gifted already to understand this. So where can they find out this information? Someone really quick. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Yes.
Is
Yes,
that by taking help from Sadhu, Guru and Shastra?
exactly. What does that translate to? Sadhu, Guru and Shastra? Shastra is these books, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. Sadhu are the devotees who are, many of them are advanced and subject matter experts and they can guide us. Sadhu, Guru, of course, Guru. You approach a spiritual master. And Bhagavad Gita talks about it at length, how they can help transform our life. So we should come to the point of acceptance that Lord's will does not make us passive, but spiritually empowered. And to develop that kind of faith, again, where can one find this kind of faith? If they already don't have, how can they develop this faith? So for that, roadmap is given, living a regulated life, following regulative principles, chanting the holy names, read Sadhu, Guru, Shastra, all those things. So His Holiness Bhakti Tirth Swami, I have this information. He emphasized that life's crises are invitations to ask, what is God teaching me right now? Usually, what is the tendency for someone who is experiencing some adversity and they are not that spiritually inclined? What is their reaction or what is their behavior? If something unfavorable happens, what do they do? Every situation is different, but they will do everything other than reflecting on what is God teaching me right now. They may just pick up the phone, talk for hours to someone they trust, cry about situation or get angry. Even yesterday someone was sharing on one of these spiritual talks, one of the calls by a very popular speaker, about 200 were there in the audience. And one of the initiated devotees asked the question that someone really hurt me years back and I can't let it go. And I really want this person to be punished. Kind of most of the audience was who were able to get a hang of life situations and how to come terms, accepting Lord's will. They were shocked. So the speaker is shocked too. And speaker just kept listening. Mataji, what are you actually trying to arrive at? I mean, so one should come to a point where, and again, that cannot be forced. It has to be out of, that is where we use our free will in a proper sense. One should learn to reflect, what is God teaching me in this situation right now? So in this way, spiritual maturity is slowly, gradually, one reaches that stage gracefully by learning how to cooperate with divine arrangement. And of course, again, senses have a role to play in it. Situations and experience have a role. Humility, tolerance, all those have a role to play. And so now, once Srila Prabhupada was very ill, and disciples begged him to slow down. So Prabhupada replied that he had no personal desire left, only the desire to serve his spiritual master. He said that if Krishna wanted him to live, he would live. And if Krishna wanted him to die, he would die. But his duty was to preach until the last breath. So why I'm sharing this story? We are talking here about the divine will, supreme will, divine desire. And we all, several times we read that Supreme Lord within the heart as Paramatma gives guidance, but because living entity is in so much forgetfulness, so then one is recommended to take shelter or accept a spiritual master who guides the person who is seriously interested, who wants to learn this art of spiritual advancement or Krishna consciousness. And in that process, one learns how to identify what is the divine will. What is my guru's will, first of all? So Srila Prabhupada, we read from his life, he was not motivated by some survival instinct or comfort or fear, but by his strong faith and alignment with his Guru Maharaj's and Lord's will. So after this divine desire, as I move to the next letter in the acronym E, something we can reflect on, we can think about, where am I resisting Krishna's desire in my life? What recent challenge might be divine redirection? How do I react when my plans collapse? So, which kind of desires which I have, they bring peace, which bring anxiety? And what would alignment with Supreme Lord's will look like moving forward for me? So now let's come to the next letter, E. So E here gives us better understanding about the empowerment, empowered elements. Understanding divine desire teaches us who initiates the creation. But the verse, it doesn't just stop here. There's a group of verses they're talking about this subject. So it reveals how this desire operates through, we read about the presiding deities of the senses, right? So the desires, they operate through deputized controllers known as presiding deities. So if the Lord desires, if by just desire of the Lord, the creation manifests, then who regulates the senses? The senses we misuse or sanctify, that brings us directly to this letter E. I put for empowered elements. We have to understand that the senses function only through divine regulation. So now, what does this really mean? The senses they are not autonomous, nor are they mechanical accidents. They are empowered instruments operating under divine supervision. So Srila Prabhupada explains that every senses, Srila Prabhupada gives a lot of talk about senses, purification of senses, blunt material senses, nectar of instruction, nectar of devotion, and talks about at great length, sarvopadi vinirmuktam, tatparatvena nirmalam, hrishikena hrishikesha sevanam bhakti ruchyate. Only by loving devotional service we can get a proper engagement for our senses. They can be purified to please the Lord, the master of senses. So every sense has a gross organ, like tongue, and it has a function, like taste. Tongue has function of taste and speech. And a controlling deity, Srimad Bhagavatam, gives us this knowledge. Every gross organ which has a subtle function has a controlling deity. For example, Varuna, Agni, and it has a supreme sanction from the Lord. So when the verse states that when the Lord lies in the waters, the last statement in the translation says, when the Lord lay in the waters, all functions were suspended. We should understand from it, Srila Prabhupada is explaining, it establishes that empowerment is revocable, means it can be taken away. The senses do not belong to us. They're like, the concept of being leased, they're not owned. So this has profound implications that enjoyment is regulated, it is not free. We enjoy through the senses, right? And accountability is built into creation also. And degradation is not cruelty, it is certification of desire. So there is example of swine given, right? I really wanted to check. The swine is, okay, I just confirmed. So in India, swine is known as suar, pigs, kind of like that species. So they live in abominable conditions. They eat stool and abominable things. So if one cultivates indiscriminate taste, the controlling deity authorizes a body suited for that taste. And then further it says, this is divine mercy. It is not a punishment. So how do you understand that? So let's go back to the translation quickly. Prabhupada says in the purport, the tongue is meant for eating, and men, animals, and birds have their different tastes because of different licenses. The taste of human beings and that of swine are not on the same level. The controlling deity, however, awards or certifies a particular type of body when the particular living entity develops a taste in terms of different modes of nature. So if human being develops taste without discrimination, like a swine, then the controlling deity is certainly certified for next term to award him the body of a swine. And the swine accepts any kind of foodstuff, including stools, and a human being who has developed such indiscriminate taste means not being careful about what you are accepting through your mouth. Such a human being should be prepared for a degraded life in the next life. So, in other places, Prabhupada says our senses are like horses, and without the reins of regulation, they drag soul into disaster. And what is the worst thing for a soul that can happen? Anyone? Hare Krishna. What is the worst thing which can happen to a soul who lives an unregulated life, uncontrolled senses? What is the worst thing that can happen to them? Okay, that's also mentioned, spiritual death. Now someone can be confused. What is meant by spiritual death? Bhagavad Gita says soul never dies. Soul is eternal. What is this spiritual death? What is spiritual death? Anyone
Hare
want to
Krishna,
comment?
Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Just being letting us trapped in this cycle of birth and death in this material world.
Yes. So for a very, very long time, to be caught in this perpetual cycle of birth, old age, death, disease. It is, these are the sufferings. So where was I? Yeah. So sense control is very important. How we are learning from these verses, group of verses. It was Dhir Krishna Prabhu nicely described in the previous verse. I watched his talk. It was so wonderfully articulated. It talked about importance of regulating, through our tongue. We can we can put in a lot of efforts to control our senses, but engagement of senses is much simpler, and it begins with two things. What are those two things we can do?
Chanting and prasadam,
Very
Mataji.
good. Chanting and honoring prasadam, because tongue is the most difficult sense organ, dangerous. So every sense has a higher purpose when dovetailed with devotion. Otherwise, it becomes cause of bondage. So unregulated senses lead to attachment, that leads to habits, habits lead to bondage. Srila Prabhupada constantly warns that unrestricted sense gratification is fastest route to lower species of life. So to the degree we are talking about swine, he mentioned swine in this particular purport. So regulation of senses actually is an austerity and also requires spiritual intelligence. And one can prayerfully include beg for in their prayers if they find themselves helpless in spite of so much reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, having so much sadhu sangha, so much opportunity to serve at the temple or otherwise. If they feel helpless, then they should include it in their prayers. They should ask for mercy from Guru and Srimati Radharani, the Supreme Lord. And so these devotional standards, regulated life, they protect the soul from future suffering. And so disciplined life, regulated senses in devotion, they invite divine empowerment. And is this empowerment permanent? Like you reached at a point where you have been very good child, let us say some good student, they please the teacher, in every way. They did submit homework on time, they excel in exams, they give gifts for the teachers, and teacher is happy. Is that stamp forever? So similarly, does a devotee have this divine empowerment forever? They have to, for that, stay always regulated and steady in their spiritual practices. And so these senses, they become allies when consciously offered to God. They are the gateways either to liberation or bondage. Srila Prabhupada, once a disciple asked Srila Prabhupada why there are so many rules in devotional life. Srila Prabhupada replied that rules are not restrictions but protections. Just as traffic laws protect life. And he explained that without regulation, even spiritual life becomes imagination. He said true freedom comes when senses are engaged under higher guidance. So now, something to think about, we can reflect on things happening in our life and relate to this topic. I have just this acronym letter E. Let us think when we get chance, which sense dominates my daily decisions? Where do I rationalize? See, when we say senses, we include mind also. And one of the things mind does mostly Unless it's a controlled mind or engaged mind. What is mind doing? Rationalizing. Rationalize. So where do I rationalize? Indulgence. That's what happens when someone gives into sense gratification. They're rationalizing. That's okay. This much is okay sometimes. So how does regulation improve my chanting? What future consequences am I preparing? How can I sanctify one or more senses better? So in this way, we are understanding this verse with the help of this deity, acronym D for divine or the supreme desire. We talked about how creation begins with Lord's will, and E is empowered elements. We are understanding the empowered elements that the senses act only by divine license. Lord will sanction. This empowerment will be there for some time. And then next natural question is, if senses are empowered, how should intelligence guide them properly? So this brings us to the next letter of this acronym DT. Okay. DEI. I is instrumental senses. So we have to understand these senses are the tools. They are not masters. Who is the master of senses? Anyone? Hare Krishna?
Rishikesha.
Yes, Rishikesha.
Krishna.
Master of the senses. So now senses are not autonomous, but we should understand they are instruments given to the living entity to be directed by intelligence, buddhi, and it should be regulated by shastra, and it should be sanctified by bhakti. So Srila Prabhupada repeatedly he teaches us, he mentions in purports that sense control does not mean sense negation, but what? Sense engagement. So the failure of material life is not that it uses senses, but it lets senses become the decision makers. What are some of the day-to-day challenges everyone experiences? I would like to hear just one or two responses. What are some of the challenges we experience day to day? And of course, it involves senses, but let's talk about some challenges in context with this topic. For example, someone starts doing something. Let us talk about some devotees who have good knowledge, they have good faith, they are serving for few years and they chant the holy names. Even they will admit, many of them will admit, they have challenges. For example, they have all this, they know what is right, what is wrong, and the importance of engagement of senses under divine will. But they may have certain challenges like they are unable to stop with certain engagement once they get into it. And it's not necessarily same with everyone, but that happens. And then what can be another example? I'm taking very simple examples, day-to-day examples that happens. So now a condition earlier, I gave you example that condition soul feels, I feel, therefore I must act, and a devotee learns that I am responsible for how I engage and what I feel. So this we should understand is the turning point between bondage and liberation. These senses, Prabhupada says, they are like knives, dangerous in the hand of child and useful in the hand of surgeon. And let's talk about tongue. The same tongue which condemns us through gossip and overeating can liberate us through chanting and honoring prasadam. So what do we see here? That intelligence can guide the senses, otherwise senses will hijack the intelligence. Srila Prabhupada warns that the spiritual life begins with the moment one stops obeying the impulse of senses and starts obeying Krishna. So we need to understand and develop this spiritual maturity in devotion, which is measured by how senses are engaged under guidance. And the regulated habits protect enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is needed, eagerness is needed, discrimination is needed, right? Everything works together. So this sense discipline sustains long-term spiritual life, and unregulated senses gradually weaken the faith. Srila Prabhupada once explained that tongue is the most dangerous sense because it has two functions, eating and speaking. If the tongue is controlled, he said, the other senses follow naturally. Therefore, he emphasized chanting and honoring prasadam as the foundation of all discipline. Control the tongue and the sense become allies. So now, time to go to the next letter in the acronym, and before that, something to deeply reflect on. Which sense dominates my desires, my choices? Where do I confuse impulse with intuition? How does my chanting affect my sensory discipline? Many times, devotees, they will ask their gurus or sannyasis after some good talk. They will present honestly their challenges, like something, they are having some interpersonal issues, or they find it challenging to do good japa, things like that. And immediately they are presented with a question. Nothing but one question. And that is, how is your japa? How is your chanting? So, what one should think, what would my day look like if senses serve devotion? Which sense needs redirection? Like that. That helps them. So now we did the understanding about divine desire, empowered elements, and how senses are instrumental. Senses must serve intelligence and devotion. Now, this acronym reaches its heart. If senses are instruments, who is the real controller? We must recognize who is the real controller. So that naturally brings us to the next letter, T. T means taste. Prabhupada mentions taste in the purport also. Taste determines our destiny because desire shapes the next body. So, next body is not random. It is awarded according to taste. It says that in the purport. Srila Prabhupada explains that the senses are given licenses and the controlling deities certify the next body based on how those licenses are used. So taste or ruchi is not just a preference. I don't have a taste. You will find people talking like that. Taste is not merely preference, it is destiny in its seed form. So taste is shaped by association, sadhu sangha, and habit. And what happens then? How does habit lead to bondage? Because habit becomes character. Character becomes qualification. And qualification determines next body. Whether you are going to spiritual kingdom or you are going to have a spiritual death. Continue your journey in 8.4 million species. This is not a punishment, it is a precision, justice. This verse says further, next line, if you go back to purport, when I was reading it, I was initially surprised. When I read that's such a life, this life, degraded life, first it talks about swine, how it with one like uncontrolled senses, and a metaphor is given. They are given a body like a swine, who just has indiscriminate taste. Then such a person must be prepared for degraded life in next life. Then it says such a life is also God's grace, because the conditioned soul desired a body like that for perfectly tasting a particular type of foodstuff. But this is also God's grace. Now we get such powerful actually reminders that any adversity also is God's grace. People who are really struggling with relationships or issues in life, these, if you hear enough some talks, they say that it's all pending karmas. They're completing their cycle. And that is all by God's grace that's happening. Someone is suffering. And especially in case of devotee, actually, with a tatya anukampa mindset, the devotee should learn to tolerate and bear whatever is coming. And however, in knowledge, if someone indulges in sense gratification, knowing, even after knowing they are headed towards degraded life, then they have to accept and understand it's by God's grace only. And so, what we love to taste today becomes the body we inhabit tomorrow. Okay? So now, Srila Prabhupada once explained that if a man insists on eating anything and everything, the Lord does not interfere. Instead, he arranges a body that perfectly matches that taste. And if one wants to eat stool, the Lord provides the body of a hog. And then, how he concluded? He said, this is not cruelty. This is the mercy. So the lesson is so devastatingly clear that Krishna, he sanctions our desires. He does not deny desire. He fulfills it responsibly. So sense gratification without discrimination is spiritual suicide disguised as freedom. And Srila Prabhupada explained that tongue is most influential sense capable of dragging one to hell or lifting one to Goloka. He warned that civilized habits without spiritual taste are simply polished animalism. And he also emphasized that bhakti begins when one willingly accepts a higher taste. Param drishtva nivartate, the higher vision. So, it's almost time. So, I will wrap up this talk within next few minutes. So, next time we sit down for prasadam, first of all, let's make a choice to have purified taste. Let's make an effort. Let us begin our prasadam with remembrance, not urgency. Let us reduce stimulation before increasing restriction. Replace our habits, not just remove them. So the idea is, just like we talk, instead of controlling, let's talk about engaging our senses like that. So associate with those whose tastes inspire bhakti. And in this way, let us see, let's figure out what taste dominates my decisions. What habits am I normalizing that shape my future? How does my chanting affect my desires? What taste do I want to carry beyond this life? Where am I mistaking indulgence for freedom? So now we are on the last letter of the acronym DT. After having done taste, how the taste determines our destiny. Y is yielding consciousness. Okay. So the translation talks about suspension. Okay. When the Supreme Lord lies within the causal waters, all manifested functions are suspended. So speech, fire, sense, deities, everything that previously appeared active becomes inert. So one thing we have to understand, this suspension is not annihilation, it is intentional withdrawal. So what does yielding consciousness mean? It means recognizing that activity itself is not autonomous. When we often assume that because we can speak, think, act, these capacities belong to us, we assume. But Bhagavatam clarifies our illusion. When Lord withdraws his sanction, the very facilities, the very faculties that define me cease to function. So yielding consciousness is therefore not weakness. Okay? Spiritually, this corresponds to moments in life when our intelligence fails, our plans collapse, our strength disappears, our senses no longer cooperate. So instead of acting like a supreme controller still, what do devotees do? These are the reminders that soul is not the controller. The conditioned soul wants empowerment without surrender. But what does Bhagavatam teach us? First surrender, empowerment will happen. So when Lord lies in waters, the universe learns dependence. When he desires again, creation resumes. Similarly, when devotee accepts suspension, for us, what does suspension mean? Suspension of ego, ambition, name, fame, adoration, entitlement. Krishna, what does he do then? He resumes guidance from within the heart. When we say, I surrender, Supreme Lord, there are so many prayers of surrender. So yielding consciousness means shifting from I act this way, I will act, to let me be an instrument. And this is the gateway. This is the gateway from, learning to engage our senses, from being a controller to learning to engage in Krishna consciousness. So there are some famous quotes, Srila Prabhupada has referred, without sanction of Supreme Lord, not a blade of grass moves. The living entity is completely dependent, but due to false ego, he thinks himself independent. Real intelligence means to know that we are always under superior control. And when Krishna withdraws his energy, the so-called powerful man becomes powerless. So in this way, once a disciple complained to Srila Prabhupada that despite hard work, nothing was succeeding. Srila Prabhupada calmly, he said, then perhaps Krishna wants you to stop relying on your strength and start relying on him. And later that disciple reflected that failure became his teacher and surrender became his formula or success. So in this way, using this acronym DT, divine desire, E for empowered element, I for instrumental senses, T, we talked about taste determines destiny, and last one, Y, yielding consciousness. So in this way, we learn about the heart of Srimad Bhagavatam's teachings, that soul is never independent, only invited to willingly surrender. So from control or engagement of senses to conscious surrender, this verse is speaking out. And so as I said before, there are these group of verses. They are talking about senses and controlling deities. And so how does this verse fit in this chapter? So as I mentioned earlier, this chapter 10 of Canto 2 defines 10 subject matters of Srimad Bhagavatam, culminating in nirodhaḥ, the suspension of cosmic activity. And this verse reveals that creation, maintenance, and dissolution are not mechanical events, but personal acts of divine will. So this verse teaches us how it doesn't just merely teach us that how universe works, but how our consciousness should work by aligning with the supreme desire. Okay? So, sorry, I went way past beyond the assigned time, but very prayerfully, we can reflect the Supreme Lord. You speak and creation awakens, you withdraw and everything rests. So please kindly purify my desires, regulate my senses, transform. Please help. We can't order. He's not an order supplier. Kindly be merciful and allow me to understand how to regulate, how to purify, how to transform my senses and taste, and so I may make some progress in this life on this path of surrender, so that my life is an offering, not an assertion. ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय, श्रीला प्रभुपाद की जय, श्रीला भगवत पाद की जय, अनंत कोटि वैष्णव विंद की जय. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much for a wonderful lecture. And as usual, today it was the acronym DD, and you described all the way to the end. So, dear devotees, this is the time to unmute yourself, ask questions, share some realizations from it, or takeaways from this wonderful lecture about the Lord controlling all senses. We don't own the senses are owned by Krishna. So that is a sobering thought, because it helps with our false ego, thinking that we own everything, including the senses. So please unmute yourself and share. You can raise your electronic hand if you want to. One person that's already done that is Dear Krishna Prabhu. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Please go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Hare Krishna Mataji, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you, Mataji. Such a beautiful class with so many important reminders. So just wanted to share a couple of them, and probably one question I have. You talked about how our services or any action on this path should be as per Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. Very, very important, because often our mind or my mind works in a way where I think this is right without even evaluating whether it will be pleasing to Guru or Sadhu or devotees or to Krishna, or whether it is even bona fide as per Shastra. So the check is, especially after when we spend few years in the movement, we think we know. So sometimes that check is very, very good. So thank you for that reminder for me. And yeah, the association so important. Uh, if we associate with devotees who are following this process properly, then we will also follow it. Otherwise, we will be also, shaky. And towards the end, you mentioned beautiful point that we have to surrender first, and then uh, I forgot the word you used, but I took it as when the mercy comes when we serve and probably get more services, because devotees and Krishna is very pleasing. They are very pleased when we are in the surrendered mood with our services. So thank you, Mataji, for all these reminders. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Thank you.
Krishna.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead,
dear.
please.
That's it, Prabhu.
Oh, Hare Krishna. Thank you, Dear Krishna Prabhu, for the summary and joy realizations for the lecture also. So next is Niru Prabhu. Please unmute yourself.
Parikshit Prabhu, 1 minute.
Yeah. Yes.
Dheer Prabhu, did you present any question? Did I miss? Did you have any
Yeah.
question?
No, I was thinking that there might be a question, but I thought while sharing my realization, I think it got answered. So thank you so much, Mataji. Hare
Thank you
Krishna.
for your realization. Yes, Niru Mataji, go ahead.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Hare Krishna, all the devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. Mataji, the lesson was beautifully explained, the verse with the acronym DT, and it came as an eye opener. Just now, Dheer Prabhu beautifully summarized the key lessons from this verse that you just shared with us. And it came to me as an eye opener that how important it is to regulate our senses, the unregulated senses. The moment we loosen the rein of our senses, we are contributing towards building our next life with into a lower species, into a lower degraded form of life. So how important it is to be thoughtful of engaging our senses in the right direction. I really like that, Mataji, that point. Yes. Thank you, Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for your reflection.
Hare Krishna. Any other questions? If not, then thank you very much, Mataji, for coming on. And you already have mentioned that we hope that this is going to be a consistent and steady, because you had very good excuses from when you were not around. We knew about it. Those of us in the background, we knew about it. So very, very happy you come, and as usual, giving a wonderful lecture. So dear devotees, this is the beginning of the week, at least a weekday, here in Maryland. You're in Maryland. Here in Pennsylvania, we've had a snowstorm that we're digging ourselves out of. But in any situation, we use it in a Krishna conscious way. If you have difficulty with the weather, it's because this is not our home. We never have difficulty in the spiritual world. So have a wonderful day and do the best that you can, remembering Krishna in everything that you do. Hare Krishna. Vancha kalpatarubhasya kripa sindhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you again. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Jai.